Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining me. We are going to be talking about summer cultured vegetables and 7 tips that I have that I can help you to make them more easily, to make them more probiotic, and to just give you some things that will happen in the summertime that don't happen all year long. You can make fermented vegetables any time of the year, but this in the summertime, everything's a little different depending on weather, depending on where you live, depending on the culture you use. We have a lot of different climates all over. So I thought for those of you who are making a lot of vegetables in the summertime, and that's happening a lot this summer. And the reason I know that is because all of the stores are sold out of the jars of quart canning jars and pint canning jars. They're just gone. And I've checked all over the place trying to find some jars and they're gone. And so that's a really good sign. That's exciting to me because that means people are having gardens. They're making more of their own foods. They're making cultured vegetables. They're making all kinds of vegetables. But that's exciting to me. There is nothing more exciting than growing your own food. It is just a thrill. It's fun. And I hope you'll do it sometime. I hope you'll take the seeds and put them in the ground and watch them grow. There's just nothing like it. And my daughter is growing some carrots, and she brought some carrots over the other day. And I swear, they're the most delicious carrots I've ever had. And I mean, you'd think carrots were carrots, but there's something about you doing it yourself that puts your love into it, that really makes a difference. And I hope you'll get a chance to do that. But if you don't, I hope that you will make some cultured vegetables. There's no better time in the summertime to make cultured vegetables. The fruits and veggies are abundant, and when you ferment them, they'll last up to like 9 months in your fridge. So it's a good time to do it. Culturing, or what some people call fermenting, is the same thing. So if you hear me use the word culture or fermenting, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of expressing how to create these probiotic foods. And it's so much easier than canning, guys, to ferment your food. You'll get probiotics, you get tons of enzymes, and you increase the vitamins in the veggies. Now, when you can your veggies, you lose things like vitamin C, vitamin B, because heat will kill those vitamins, especially vitamin C. And you also lose the enzymes and you lose the probiotics. If you're fermenting, you get those. And I don't think canning's bad in the sense that it's a great way to preserve your food, especially because we need it in the wintertime. But did you know that when you ferment your veggies, the vitamin C increases from 60 milligrams that's in the food naturally to 700 milligrams? That's in things like cabbage and other vegetables that you can. It just skyrockets. And that's not all. All other vitamins and minerals, including vitamins A and B, will increase too. It's part of the process of fermentation. The minerals that are in the food are going to be easier to absorb since basically cultured foods or fermented foods are pre-digested, and that's because of the process of fermentation, which is what the microbes do for you. And I haven't really begun to tell you all the probiotics that you get. 1 spoonful of cultured veggies contains more probiotics than an entire supplement bottle of probiotics. And it's also easier absorbed by the body. Most of the time, unless you've got a specially designed probiotic, the stomach acids kill the probiotic supplements. But when you get it in the food, when you get it in a fermented food, it goes to the parts of the body that is needed, and it has like this little protective halo around the food. So it's not killed in those stomach acids, and you get more benefits. So I love the juice from cultured veggies. Guys, I can't tell you how many times I go into the kitchen and get a swig of cultured veggie juice. I do this all the time, especially in the summertime. I kind of call it, we have some recipes called gut shots where I make half vegetables and then fill the rest of the jug up with water so that I can have a lot of the juice, because the juice is just as powerful as the veggies themselves. And sometimes I'll just take a hit because I know it gives me a lot of vitamin C. And honestly, I think it takes 10 to 15 minutes and I will feel better after having had a shot of cultured veggie juice. Now, fermenting foods is really an art, and it's going to be unique to you. You have a different type of kitchen than everybody else, and it works slightly different for everyone. It still works, but it depends on your temperature in your kitchen, the culture you use, the veggies you use. And in time, as you ferment these, you'll get better and better at your ability and confidence. But here's the other thing. The more you ferment food, the more you have those unseen microbes and yeast, good yeast too, that are dancing around in your kitchen that you're not aware of, that's going to help you ferment your foods better and better. Like for me, my stuff ferments very, very well because I've been doing it for so long. So everybody's home, everybody's body has trillions of microbes in them. And we can't see them. They're invisible, but they're there. And so they're in your kitchen too. They're there as you ferment your food. And it helps you the more you make them because those invisible microbes live on your body, live around you, live on your countertops. They live everywhere. And the more good bacteria you have, the better your food will ferment and the healthier you will be. So this is really much easier than you think it is. And I mean, culturing vegetables is super easy. That one of the things that I teach at my classes, everybody tells me, oh my gosh, this is so much easier than I thought it was. Because people tend to put a lot of rules and regulations on things. But I've been doing this so long. I know what works. I know what doesn't. And I'm not going to tell you anything that I don't know because I want you to be successful. And I think I have like 70 or 80 cultured vegetable recipes on my site. And that doesn't count the ones in my 3 books that I wrote. And then my ebooks for my ProBio members, I have even more, probably double or triple that. And if you're new to this and you want to try store-bought versions to see which one you like, that's a great idea. You can go to your health food store, look in the refrigerated section, and look for ones that use live cultures and try them and see which ones you like. And then I can help you make them at home, which is going to be less expensive and really, really fun. The journey of making these cultured vegetables is just the best part. So I really want you to try it because you're not going to believe how easy it is and how fun it is. And I don't want you to miss that. So, okay, let's get into the 7 tips for making cultured vegetables, especially in the summertime. This can also apply to other times, but for now, let's say that this is for summertime. So, number 1. Gather your ingredients. Buy the freshest vegetables you can find, and summertime's the ideal time to do that. I just want you to know, though, I have cultured a ton of vegetables in the winter, too. So don't worry about that. You can still ferment in the winter. But what happens is you tend to get this thing called common yeast, and it's a harmless white yeast that occurs if the veggies aren't fresh, if you don't use enough culture. And I'll give you a link in the description below to see what it looks like. But it really does, it kind of makes the veggies taste off if you have to scoop off this stuff. It's like a little white foamy stuff. And if you have to scoop it off, otherwise it'll make your veggies taste bad. So that can happen if your veggies aren't fresh. It can happen if you don't use enough salt. It can happen if you don't use enough cultures. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to hurt you, but it can make your vegetables taste off. So if you're getting that, that means the next time your veggies either weren't fresh, you weren't using a strong enough culture, or you weren't using enough salt. So you can culture almost any vegetable, but as a general rule of thumb, cabbage usually takes 6 days. Now, I know there's a lot of people that do it for months, and that's fine too. But I have found, and I had a microbiologist friend test this one time who came to my class. I have found that you get more probiotics if you do it for 6 days because the bacteria has enough food to eat, and then you refrigerate them after that. And then that's when you have the most probiotics. Now, you can ferment them in the older methods where they did it for weeks and weeks. However, I did find that they didn't have as many probiotics in them. So that's why I don't do it. Now, if you want to do other vegetables like carrots or tomatoes, asparagus, things like that, squashes, usually only takes 2 to 3 days. Pickles only take a couple of days. And all my recipes have the amount of time it takes. For instance, you only do cucumbers and pickles for like 2 to 3 days on your counter. And then you let them continue to ferment in your refrigerator. And if you don't do that, they tend to get mushy. So unless you use a ton of salt. Salt is a very big key thing to keeping things crunchy. We'll talk about that later. But for most of the part, if you're going to do cabbage, it's 6 days on the counter. Everything else is 2 to 3 days. But check out my recipes to know exactly what that is. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, starter cultures. I have a cutting edge culture that I love. That's my favorite starter culture. I help design it. And it ferments my veggies perfect every time. I only use this now, but you don't have to use it to make cultured vegetables. I just want you to make them. But for me, I have found the most success with those and the most probiotics. I've tried making veggies for years. I've done them other ways too. I've done them with Kefir whey. I've done them with salt, just salt, and other culture products that I found on the market that are good too. There's some good ones out there. And but I found that the product that I have works best because we designed it so it has the most of what is naturally occurring in cultured vegetables. And the naturally occurring bacteria that you make in cultured vegetables is Lactobacillus plantarum. And it is, guys, it's a great probiotic. And there's nothing else like it. I mean, it's so individual to cultured vegetables. And so my product is designed with mostly that bacteria in it to strengthen what's naturally occurring in cultured vegetables with a few other things that really make it strong. And that being said, you don't have to buy my product to make cultured vegetables. You can make it with Kefir whey, or you can make it with salt or other brands, but I just love my product. So it's up to you. I really just want you to make it because then you'll get the benefits and then you'll get better and then you'll tell your friends and then you'll see that what I'm talking about is true. And I really want that for you. So one of the reasons I designed my product was because I kept running out of everybody else's product and I couldn't get it. And it just made me upset because they would say, okay, it's going to take us 2 months to make it. And I'm like, this is crazy. I want to make my own product so I have it available all the time. So I don't have to tell everybody that it's not available. And I wanted it available. So that was one of the big reasons that I made it. So let me talk to you about all the different methods, okay? Because I want you to make really good cultured vegetables so you can reap all the benefits that you can get from them. Okay, if you're not going to use a starter culture and you're just going to use salt, there's a few things that you need to know. Okay, most methods using salt will ferment, some of them ferment for longer periods of time, some 3 to 6 weeks. Mine will only do 6 days. I don't recommend, like I said before, fermenting for that long because it does diminish the probiotics, but it's really up to you. Because when you culture vegetables, the acidifying bacteria turn to a more vinegar type of brine over time. And I'm wanting more of a probiotic brine. So here's the deal with salt. It's very important to use extra salt, which is like 3 tablespoons per gallon of cultured veggies if you're not using a culture. And reason being is that you really want to drop that pH in your cultured vegetables when you're making them. And without enough salt, you won't achieve the safe and proper balance to allow them to ferment properly. So you want to make sure you use at least 3 tablespoons to a gallon. Now, for like a half gallon, that would be a tablespoon and a half. And even for a quart, I use, at least 3/4 of a tablespoon, but I usually use a tablespoon. And I do more in pickles because I like them crunchy. So I always add more salt for pickles. So I don't recommend fermenting other veggies with just salt except for like pickles and cabbage. Cabbage works really well, but other vegetables like tomatoes and carrots, they do not do very well with just salt without a culture. They get slimy, they break down. Tomatoes are very acidic. Tomatoes and carrots have a lot of sugar in them. So if you're going to do other vegetables, I really recommend using a culture packages. It just works better. Some people have done okay, like with asparagus. But again, it just really depends on how much salt you're using and if you're dropping that pH. But things like tomatoes and carrots, they don't do very well with just salt. They get super slimy and they fall apart and they don't ferment properly. So you can use just salt. I want you to make cultured vegetables. And if you don't have access to these other cultures, then you use salt. Just make sure you use enough of it. So, okay, number 2, Kefir whey. A lot of people use the whey that you strain off when you make Kefir cheese, and you get a lot of extra Kefir whey. One of the secrets with this is that when you use the Kefir whey, you should really strain it the day before you use it for cultured vegetables. Otherwise, the culture doesn't have the proper bacteria cultures in it to culture your veggie properly. Because if you use Kefir whey that's been sitting in your fridge for a long time, all the probiotics have diminished, and it doesn't take very long because once they are separated from the curd part of the kefir, they start to really rapidly lose their probiotic values. So within a day of ferment, if you want to make cultured vegetables, always strain your kefir whey like that day or the day before so that your veggies will ferment properly. Okay, now let me tell you this. One of the reasons I don't use kefir whey is because there's a lot of different bacteria in kefir. And all these different bacteria and good yeasts that are in kefir aren't specific to cultured vegetables. So, there's 50 plus good bacteria and yeast in kefir. And what happens is they compete for dominance as to which one's going to rule. And the one specific one that you really want a lot of, which is naturally occurring in cultured vegetables, is Lactobacillus plantarum, which is a super bacteria. And you want a lot of that. But if you use kefir whey, that will diminish because there's other bacteria and good yeast in kefir that will try to compete with each other. And it also can change the taste of the veggies over time. It doesn't always do this, but it can give it a very strong twang that I don't like. So it really just depends on how strong your kefir whey is, what you're using. And honestly, each batch has a mind of its own. So kefir whey still makes good cultured vegetables. I've just gotten more picky over time. I want to get the most Lactobacillus plantarum that I can get because it is fantastic and it's naturally occurring in cultured vegetables and you don't want to diminish that. But anyway, if that's all you got, it still works great. And I highly recommend making cultured vegetables with whatever you have as long as you make them so you can reap the benefits. Okay, tip number 3. The fermenting time is going to change in the warmer months. The warmer your home, the faster your veggies are going to be done. And so let's say your home is 75 degrees. Then they may be done a day earlier or sooner if your home is above 75 degrees. Like let's say it's 80. They can get done several days ahead of time if it's an 80-degree day, if it's 80 degrees in your house. So instead of 6 days, it can be 4 days. And the only way that you're going to know is for you to taste them. And if they taste really sour and tart, and let's say you're making sauerkraut. If it tastes like sauerkraut, if it tastes that tart sauerkraut taste, and you can see the whey that's formed in the bottom, and the veggies have risen to the top, because when you ferment them, the veggies are going to you're going to see a lot of activity in there as far as the veggies are going to rise to the top, the whey is going to be at the bottom, it's going to kind of separate. And if you taste it and it has that tangy taste like cabbage, they're done. And it doesn't matter if it's 6 days, it doesn't matter if it's 4 days, it doesn't matter if it's 3 days or 5 days, they're done. And you need to put them in the fridge. Now, things like carrots, celery, they usually ferment in 2 to 3 days. But if they're on the counter and your house is really warm between 75 and 80 degrees, then they could get done in a day and a half or 2 days. Just check them, taste them. Carrots don't get very sour tasting because there's so many sugars in them. But they'll have a slightly, it's not even a tang. It's kind of like you'll see the liquid start to get a thick, cloudy color. And when that happens, you know they're done. So it's best to follow my recipes and don't over-ferment them because over-fermenting them causes problems. And you're going to lose a lot of probiotics, but you're also going to get, sometimes you get the yeast that I'm talking about that you don't want. So don't over-ferment them, especially if your house is warm. Okay, number 4. Bubbles and fermenting properly. A comment I often hear from cultured vegetables is they're not bubbly. And that doesn't mean that they're bad. It really depends on the culture that you're using. If the veggies rise in the jar and the whey goes to the bottom and they taste sour and tart, you know they're fine. Bubbles usually occur like on day 2 or 3, but that's not always the case. It really just depends on your kitchen, on your temperature, the culture you use. So a lot of people think there's something wrong if they don't see bubbles. And so sometimes I don't see them, but that's often because the temperatures are cooler or that I just didn't see it when it was happening because it only will last for like a day. But it doesn't mean they're not working. It's not really about the bubbles. It's more about the taste. And if they're rising up, the whey and veggies are separating a little bit. So if the vegetables do rise up in the jar, I always try to push them down with a spoon. And it's okay if they do that, but sometimes if they get up above the water, they can turn brown. So, and this is really the opposite of canned foods. A raised lid is something to be alarmed about when you're canning foods. But in fermentation, it is a good sign. It means the good bacteria are fermenting and bubbling and doing their job. Canned foods contain no good bacteria. It's all dead. So a raised lid means danger. But here's the thing. You can't get botulism from cultured vegetables. It's impossible because the only way you can get botulism is to heat all the vegetables like you would in canning them. And then the only bacteria that can survive heat is botulism. So that never happens when you're fermenting foods because you have all those other good bacteria in there that keep your veggies safe. So those acidifying bacteria keep the harmful ones out, and botulism can only happen when you kill all the other bacteria off, and that's with heat. So that's a good thing that fermenting is very, very safe. Okay, number 5. Number 1 important rule is you always need to use salt when you're making cultured vegetables. People ask me all the time if they can do it without salt because they have a problem with sodium or they're trying to be on a sodium-free diet. Well, and one thing I want to say about that is if you're concerned about salt, always make sure you use a good salt with minerals in it. Because a lot of the people struggle with salt because the salt is stripped of all the minerals. And there's usually like 80 minerals in good salt. Himalayan, Celtic sea salt, all of those salts naturally have minerals, which your body actually really, 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 really needs. Minerals are so essential to a healthy body, especially as you get older. And you really need that. So one of the things I need to really encourage you about for making cultured veggies, you got to use salt. Because if you don't, your veggies will be slimy and mushy and disgusting. So salt keeps them crunchy. And if you're using just salt to make cultured vegetables and you're not using a culture, you need to use more salt than it calls for in the recipes, like I stated before when I was talking about salt, because you want to make sure that pH drops and the vegetables ferment properly. And you can really use any kind of salt, but I really do encourage you to use the one with minerals. And here's the deal. Fermentation loves minerals, but so does your body. And they make everything work better when you have all those minerals. And a lot of people have nutritional deficiencies because they don't have enough minerals in their diets. A lot of our soils are stripped of minerals. And so adding salt that has 80 minerals like Celtic sea salt or Himalayan, it really does help your body to get those minerals that it needs, but it also helps your vegetables to ferment properly. So it's really important to use salt. Okay, number 6. Jars for making cultured vegetables. You can make most of your foods in a canning jar, with just either a metal or a plastic lid. I like the plastic because the metal tends to degrade. Because here's the deal. It's not bad to use the metal lids, but if the vegetables touch the metal lid, see, when you ferment vegetables, they actually remove pesticides and compounds in them naturally through the process of fermentation. It removes those harmful chemicals. And so it can degrade a metal lid a little bit. It's okay as long as the veggies aren't touching it. But I like to use a plastic lid. You can also use clamp down jars. You can use airlock vessels, which I love to use when in the process of fermentation. Then you remove them when the fermentation's done, and then you put on another lid instead. You can use crocks. I haven't had as much success with the crocks because it has too much air. It's hard to keep the air out, which can cause the veggies to get that yeast on them. But almost all the time, I make mine in canning jars with a lid and an airlock lid. You don't have to use an airlock lid. What an airlock lid does is it's like a little thing that you put on top of the jar and you put a little bit of water in it. And then as your veggies ferment, you get some bubbles and some things. You get some fermentation that's going to go up. You're going to get this air and it's going to go up into this little lid and it's going to be captured in the water so that your veggies stay crisper. They taste better. I just like them. You don't have to use them, but I like them because the veggies taste better. But you can just use a jar with the lid. I don't care what you do. I think you need to do it. Don't let people scare you and say you got to use an airlock jar. That drives me crazy. I've had people write me emails that there was a certain company that said, if you don't use an airlock jar, you're going to cause all kinds of problems. And that is not true. They are, follow the money in that case. I mean, I sell them too. I sell like this, but I am not going to tell you that you got to have one because I want you to make these. And if you don't have one, it's no big deal. I made them for years without them. It's fine. And, they've been making fermented vegetables for thousands of years, and they didn't have airlock jars back then either. So you do not need to use an airlock device if you're making cultured vegetables. It makes them taste better, but it's not a necessity. So don't let anybody scare you. And it makes me upset when they scare people because then people think they're going to do something wrong. These are some of the easiest things to make. And fermentation is very, 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 very safe to make. It's one of the safest forms of preserving food there is. And that's not from me. That's even from the U.S. Agricultural Society. And I have a blog on that. So I'm going to put that in the link description below so you can see for yourself that even they recommend saying that it's safer. Because here's the deal. E. coli, things like that can't live in cultured vegetables because the good bacteria dominate and keep them out. So it's even safer than raw vegetables because those harmful bacteria cannot live on fermented vegetables. And I'll let you read that article it's not even from me, it's from a U.S. Agriculture Society saying how safe they are. And so that's why I don't want anybody to scare you and try to convince you that you've got to have their product because it's ridiculous. So I've been doing it for 20 years. If anybody's going to die, it was going to be me. So I've never gotten sick from them. I've gotten nothing but health benefits. So they're very powerful. They're a very powerful food. You might get a detox reaction because they go in and clean house. They go in and kill the harmful bacteria inside of you and remove those pathogenic bacteria so they can dominate. And so you want to eat these on a regular basis because they're a transient bacteria. Lactobacillus plantarum is it does only last 2 to 3 days in the body. But it acts, what's really cool. Okay, let me tell you this. Okay, so it acts like a pathogen in your body. So the other pathogens get really attracted to it because they think, oh, we've got a buddy in here. And then it kills it. And then it removes it from the body. It steals all of its food. It steals all the pathogens' food. And they can't survive in the body. So then they're exiting from the body. So that's one of the things they do. They protect the gut lining. They don't let harmful bacteria in. They're fantastic for so many things, for food poisoning, for stomach problems. Nothing works better than the juice from cultured vegetables or the vegetables themselves. And I have tons of blogs on that. So I will put that in the link description below too, because I just wish everybody knew about it. I just get more emails about how cultured vegetables and their juice has helped people with stomach problems than any other emails I get. And I want you to receive that benefit too. So you can use any kind of canning jar. Just make sure it's glass. Don't do plastic because it'll degrade it. You can use metal, but don't let it touch the vegetables for very long because eventually it'll deteriorate it. Try to use a plastic lid if you can. But if you don't have it, do the best you can. Just make these vegetables. They're fantastic. Airlocks are great, but you don't have to have them. Cultures are great, but you don't have to have them. I just want you to make them because I want you to see what I discovered, how wonderful they are. Okay, number 7. This is the last one. The comma on veggies, the yeast I talked about. It's the most troublesome thing that people have, and it doesn't happen all the time. But it looks like people think it's mold. It's not mold. It's a yeast. And it's really not a reason for alarm. It's just this thing called comma yeast, and it can be found in cultured foods, and it looks scary and unpleasant and smells a little strong, but it's not harmful. You can just scoop it off and make sure you get it all, and then stick it in, make sure your jar is stuck in the fridge so it'll stop fermenting, and your veggies will be fine. But if you get a lot of it, just remember what I said before. Make sure you use fresh veggies. You might need to use more salt or a starter culture. It happens most often if I reuse my brine from another jar. You can reuse the brine from another jar to make a new batch of cultured veggies. So let's say you make a half gallon of cabbage and you have a bunch of brine left. You can take a half a cup of that brine and put it in another jar and add the vegetables and let it ferment again. And that will be your culture. You can do that over and over again. And I got a blog about that too. So I'll put that in the link below. But if that starts happening on a regular basis, that you're getting this comma yeast, it means your culture is not strong enough from the brine. So you'll need to either use a starter culture, use more salt, because if you're getting a lot of that comma yeast, it means that you need to use something stronger. So When I use a starter culture, I usually don't have any of those problems. Also, keep your vegetables submerged under the water. And, a lot of people sell those weights, the glass lids and the weights. And I used them, what was it, 20 years ago? I used them a couple times, but they just drove me crazy because I had to wash them. I didn't have the right ones for all my jars. It was just one more thing I had to do, and I just quit using them. So you don't have to use glass wigs. I think they're annoying. A lot of people will roll up cabbage leaves and put them on top to keep the vegetables submerged, but then they mold and they get brown stuff on them because they're up above the water, because you want your vegetables under the water because the acidifying bacteria keep the vegetables safe. They keep them fermenting properly. And when you have cabbage up above it, then it turns brown. It can ruin your cultured vegetables. So I don't do that either. So there's a lot of people that, sell a lot of products. They're not bad. They're good. I just don't use them because it's just too much work for me. I don't want to wash glass weights. So I just, have them. I make so many cultured vegetables. I don't have time for this. So I just let mine ferment. I push them down if I can, but if they rise up above the jar too much, it's only a few days and they're going to go in the fridge. So I try to push them down, open the jar and push them down. And my veggies are always fine. So I really don't have these problems because I really think it's the starter culture that I use that keeps them safe. So anyway, keeping them submerged underwater keeps those good acidifying bacteria and keeps most of your problems at bay. But if your vegetables do climb up, don't freak out. It'll probably be okay. Okay, so this isn't actually a number. This is just one more thing I want to tell you. Don't over ferment. If your veggies are fermented too long, then you have the higher chance of getting that common use if you ferment them too long. So temperatures, let them ferment in cooler temperatures longer. In warmer temperatures, you do it less time. And 63 to 75 degrees is about the norm. So that would take about 6 days for cultured cultured cabbage, and about 2 to 3 days for all other vegetables like, carrots, celery, things like that. And you should be fine with those kinds of things. If it's warmer than your house than that, then you're going to have to cut down your fermenting time. If it's cooler than your house than that, then you're going to have to take longer to ferment them. And if you do get that yeast, then just scrape it off and place them in the fridge right away when you do. Otherwise, it will ruin the taste of your vegetables. So that is my tips. You don't need fancy equipment, and don't let anybody tell you do. That drives me crazy because then they make it hard for you and they give you all these rules and they scare you the bejeepers out of you that you're going to do it wrong. Most people are scared they're going to do it wrong. And I'm going to talk to you about, I think I've got a podcast about how safe they are to make. They're safer than raw vegetables. So because there's so many good bacteria in them. So I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, so many years, 19, 20, something like that. And honestly, you will know if there's something wrong with your cultured vegetables. They will smell horrific. I had a jar that had a crack in it, I didn't know. So it was letting air in. And my cabbage was bad. And I saw black mold on it and it smelled so bad. There's no way in the world I would have ever eaten it. And that was only one time in 19 years that I had anything going bad. And that was because my jar had a big crack. So it was letting air in and they'd been in the fridge for a long time. And I think I'd eaten some of them beforehand. They were fine. But as they got older, because the air wasn't sealed out of them, they got bad. So, and I knew it. Oh my gosh, it smelled horrific. So you'll know that's the one good thing about cultured vegetables. You will know something's wrong because they will look bad and they will smell bad. But for the most part, these are one of the safest ways to preserve your food. And they're delicious. And you really need them in the winter when, vegetables and things aren't aplenty. And if you have some, they can last 9 months in your fridge and they still stay perfectly preserved. And remember, when you eat cultured vegetables or any cultured food, all of them preserve the food. Kefir can last months in your fridge, perfectly preserved because of the good bacteria. But when you eat them, they preserve you. They keep you young. They keep you healthy. They make you feel like $1 million. And you don't have to believe me. You just have to make them. So I hope you will take the time this summer to, make some cultured vegetables. It seems to me everybody is canning or doing something with vegetables this summer because it's hard to find jars. I'm running out of jars to sell. I've got a lot of colored jars like blue and brown, but I can't find the clear ones. Everybody's buying them, which is thrilling to me. So people are eating more vegetables. So that is always a good thing. Have a wonderful week, guys. Try some cultured vegetables, maybe at your local health food store in the refrigerator section. You'll see them. They'll say live cultures on the back of them. Or please make your own. It's super fun. You're basically just chopping up vegetables, putting them in a jar, covering them with water, putting in a culture or salt or kefir whey, whichever one you have. Maybe some seasonings, and I have 78 recipes on my website. Putting a lid on it, letting them ferment from either 2 days to 6 days, depending on what vegetable you used. And then you stick them in the refrigerator and they last for 9 months. That's all that it is. It's not hard. It's super easy. It's super fun. And I can show you how. Check out my recipes at culturedfoodlife.com, and you'll see a little button at the top that says recipes. And I'll put that link in the description below. So thanks for listening, guys. And I hope to see you next week. And if you like it, subscribe to my website, and you'll get a free email every week that has tips and health topics and recipes. And I also have a Biotic Pro membership site where you can get tons of extra recipes. I just put out a low carb ebook this month for my members, and they are getting, I think it's like 56 or 57 low carb recipes, because a lot of people ask me about that. So I put it on an ebook for my members. And I also have some free recipes for everybody. You can just type in low carb on my website and it'll take you there. So thanks for listening, guys. Have a great week, and get some cultured vegetables this summer and just see if they don't help boost your immune system, make you feel great, and give you lots of vitamin C and vitamin B and all the vitamins and minerals you need. Have a good one, guys.